Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Jurassic World Rebirth release. As you can see, we've got ourselves another Pop Funko. This is the Mosasaurus, and this one I've actually seen showing up at Walmart quite a bit recently. It's really the only one in my area of the Rebirth Pop Funkos I've seen quite regularly at Walmart. So that's just something, to take note of if you are interested in grabbing it and, you want to get it for a decent price. I'd say grab it from Walmart, but you can see the packaging is pretty much the standard when it comes to these guys. Nothing overly special ever on the packaging, it seems, for the Pop Funkos. So let's pop this box open and check it out. So here is our Rebirth version of the Mosasaurus, and I will say, when it comes to the actual paint apps, this one might be the nicest overall out of any of these Pop Funkos so far. The colors are very off compared to what you see in Rebirth, which isn't really a surprise when it comes to the Pop Funkos, but at the same time, it does actually look really cool. I actually quite enjoyed the color scheme of this one, and maybe the Rebirth version would have even looked cooler had it, contained a similar color scheme. But you can see when we get nice and close, and my camera has a fit because it's green, the skin texture actually looks okay on this one. Obviously not perfectly replicating the skin texture of the Mosasaurus from Jurassic World in any way, shape, or form, but it does look pretty cool as far as the actual fine detail goes. You can see the teeth are all sculpted, all painted. They are painted with a nice light tone, slightly sloppily, but for the most part they look okay. We can see on the inside of the mouth, the extra row of teeth are actually also painted, although there's only like 3 teeth on each side, but they are also painted. We've got the tongue in there. We have a nice pinkish tone for the inside of the mouth, a slightly different shade of color there for the tongue itself, and then of course the teeth on the lower jaw, and it does have a little bit of a gloss coat in there, which of course is nice to see. The eyes are painted with a black, as per usual when it comes to the Pop Funkos. There's not really any pupil or anything, but again, it doesn't look half bad when it comes to this type of figure. There is a slightly darker shade of color there that circles around the eye and smoothly transitions out to this other green. What is also cool about this one is they've actually applied what looks to be maybe like a dark wash to the figure, which I think really amps up the lifelike factor of the figure overall. I wish they would do that more often when it comes to the Pop Funkos. This one actually is a little splotch. This side here has a little splotch of paint there on the eye, a little white spot that almost kind of gives it that look of like eye shine, which is interesting. But you can see pretty much the same thing again over here. There is also a light tone for the underside of the Mosasaurus, and here we can see it's basically been dry brushed over, so you can sort of see some of the greenish tones of the underside of the Mosasaurus as well. Definitely a little sloppy as far as the paintwork goes, especially when you move up into the undersides of the flippers, but I think it looks okay for what it is. As you move up to the top of the head, you can see a very dark green run down the center of the head, and then kind of run along where we start to have those very bumpy sort of osteoderms, and you can see like the ridges pick up as you continue to move along, some pretty large ones moving down along the back of the Mosasaurus. There is also a really dark tone that kind of patterns through, and you see it start basically in the body, past the head in the body here, and that runs out into the tail, not the entire way, but, quite a little ways out. We can still see, again, the transition where that dry brushing has been applied is definitely quite sloppy and doesn't really look natural. But the detailing, again, as you move out, becomes, kind of like a mixed bag, because some areas are pretty decently detailed. Other areas are kind of smoothed out and washed out, like you can see here on the flippers. You do have a nice curve to the tail, a really sharp curve, actually. And again, we continue to have that darker tone following along the upper side, and that's definitely been applied with an airbrush and looks really smooth and natural as far as that transition goes. You can get a look at the curve from this side, and of course those larger kind of like ridges that follow along the back of the Mosasaurus tail right there. But overall, it's definitely not your most, screen accurate interpretation of a Jurassic World version of a Mosasaurus, but it is still pretty fun for what it is. It's also another instance where we get a very small version, and I think this might be the smallest one that we've had so far in the line. You have lengthwise looking at about 4 3/4 inches, or just a hair. No, actually, I'd say maybe about 12 centimeters on the dot. And then for a height, the highest point is definitely the tail at about 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, There is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A Human Being next to our Mosasaurus. And you can see again, as I already stated, it is really quite small. I would say even smaller than your standard Pop Funko. And to show you that, here we have the D-Rex for Rebirth next to the Mosasaurus, and as you can clearly see, that Mosasaurus is quite a bit smaller. Also, these two actually look kind of fun next to each other because the positioning of the head of the D-Rex is almost like staring directly into the eyes of the Mosasaurus. But as you can see again, when it comes to like your typical size ranged Pop Funko, this Mosasaurus is a bit on the smaller side. And then one more comparison with kind of a classic Pop Funko. We have the Jurassic World T-Rex here next to the Mosasaurus, again giving you a good idea of the fact that the Mosasaurus is just a little bit smaller than you might expect. So this brand new Jurassic World Rebirth Pop Funko Mosasaurus is actually kind of cool. It's just a little bit small and does contain some sloppy paintwork when it comes to the lighter tone moving along the underside, but past that area, I would say the paintwork does actually look pretty cool, and the fact that they've kind of applied what looks to be maybe like a wash, and also just generally has paintwork from like, you know, the head all the way out into the tail, does look pretty cool for this one. I like the overall appearance as far as what they've done when it comes to the paint apps, and even though they don't really look like the colors that we see on the Rebirth version, definitely a bit too bright and everything as far as the colors go, it still looks natural and lifelike, and honestly would have looked cool on the Mosasaurus in the film. So they've done a pretty good job as far as most of the paintwork goes, but some of it is a little sloppy. But aside from that, the sculpt is decent for being Pop Funko. Again, very exaggerated, very stylized as they usually are. It's got kind of a fun, fairly decent pose overall. Like, it's got its mouth open, it has a nice curve to the tail, so it does show a little bit of life as far as that goes. And again, the fact that it is smaller is convenient in one way because you can fit it into your collection a little bit easier, but it's surprising that all of these Pop Funkos, again, are so small for the Rebirth figures, and then the supersized one that we got is like the Spinosaurus, which is a decently sized dinosaur. But when you have things like the Titanosaurus and the Mosasaurus and even the D-Rex, which those are pretty huge it seems in the film, and then you go with the Spino for the supersized one. But it is what it is. This one is still pretty cool. So if you are interested, again, you can either order it from the Funko store, which is where I purchased it from, or you can grab it from Walmart, again, in store. One way or another, I recommend grabbing it. So make sure you do, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.